Thank you everybody for joining our webinar with Gulliver on the top 8 destinations in Peru. To begin, my name is Katie. I am an Ecuador and Galapagos travel expert for 10 years as well as Peru. I've been working at Gulliver since October of 2019. I'm originally from Maine, USA, and some things that I like that I'd like to share with you are that I enjoy family adventures. And I like to hike and trek in my free time, especially in Ecuador and mountainous regions of the Andes. So let's begin with the objectives of the Peru webinar. We're going to be discovering the highlights of Peru, and we have 8 of them that we chose. These are the best places to visit and the information that is most important for you to know. And this will help encourage sales for Peru. And at the end of the webinar, we also have an example of an itinerary that we would be able to provide. So let's begin with general information. Peru is the biggest country in the 6th biggest country in the Americas, and it's the 4th largest in South America. There are many airports in Peru, but the 2 main airports that you should be aware of are the international airports and Lima and Cusco. So here we have an important airport of Lima where it's connecting to many of the South American countries such as Argentina, Chile, Ecuador. And Cusco is really important because when you go to visit Machu Picchu or the Sacred Valley, you'll be flying there from Lima, and then you can continue your journey to other airports in Peru depending on the itinerary. So another popular way to travel through Peru is by bus. These are the best buses you can find in South America. They're able to connect to many locations, and they're large and comfortable. They have air conditioning. They're able to recline. So these are the best land transportations available. Some more general information about Peru to keep in mind. It is actually one of the top 5 most competitive tourist destinations in the Americas. It is winner of 3 World Travel Awards in 2019. So this is basically the Oscars of travel. And the best time to travel is all year. Lima and the coast is best to travel December to March because the coast can be foggy, and this time is the best to visit where it's not as rainy, humid, and foggy. In Huaraz to the north, the best times are March to June. And in Cusco, the best times to visit are April to December because there's no rain. Now you might notice that where's the best place to visit September to December? Well, this is Peru's low season. Okay, so let's begin with the first of the top 8 of Peru, and this is Lima. Lima is the capital of Peru. It's about 68 kilometers long in general and has a population of 16 million people. The best, safe, and most interesting districts are the Miraflores and San Isidro areas, which you can see right here. Miraflores and San Isidro. So you can see it's quite far from the airport, which is right here. And especially with traffic, it's best to consider the time that it takes to arrive to these areas when your passengers are arriving or departing. So Lima is the capital and the most populous city of Peru. It's actually the 5th largest city in Latin America. And Lima is a really important city because it's the political, industrial, cultural, and financial commercial center of the country. So here is the airport, the Jorge Chávez International Airport. And let's continue. So let's talk about the city tours that we do in Lima. Now here is a map where you can see the blue outlines here. This is the route that we use. This is a half-day city tour. Okay, so we can do this into a full day, but we would do this with other activities. So first, in the half-day city tour, we could do this in the morning or in the afternoon, and it'll last about 3 to 4 hours. It visits the historical center and the colonial areas and 2 museums. So we have to keep in mind that sometimes with traffic and distance, we do the tours considering the best ways to visit. So anyways, so this can be done with both private and shared tours. And here's the Larco Museum. It's a museum of pre-Columbian and Hispanic Incan times. It's actually built within a colonial house that was reconstructed for the museum with many different Hispanic paintings and ancient relics. So it actually includes all cultures of Lima and Peru. Here is the Gold Museum. It's one of the largest gold museums there are, and it has artifacts of pre-Inca and Incan times. For an additional experience, once the half-day tour of Lima is done, we can do a nighttime city tour, which is really interesting. It's about 3 to 4 hours also, and is in the evening, as it's best done at night due to the different shows like the Magic Water Circuit and the dinner show. This also important to note is that it begins actually at 6 p.m. with a hotel pickup, and it'll take about 40 minutes to arrive where the city tour begins due to traffic and things like that in Lima. So what we have pictured here is the Magic Water Circuit. There's actually different places where the water show is demonstrated with different lights, and they go in coordination with rhythm of music and lights. So this lasts about 45 minutes. After the water show, we walk to the Hacienda del Paso. And the really nice thing about this is that there's different folkloric dances, and they do this while you're eating. So you have a buffet dinner with an entree, main plate, and dessert. And for each part of the dinner, you have different dances and different musics. So afterwards, the show continues with a horse show after dinner. It's located in the same hacienda, and it's about 30 minutes, and they do different costumes, and they have about 4 different shows with the horses. So that's a really nice way to wind down after the dinner and see something really spectacular. After this, you return to the hotel with our transportation, and you should be arriving about 10 p.m. So that brings us to number 2 of our top 8 in Peru, Cusco. Cusco is a really interesting city because it was actually built by Manco Capac. And Manco Capac was the first Inca to build a city in Peru, and who began to do his conquest in Peru. And this was actually the first city of the Incas. It's the second most populated city in Peru. And we have another city tour here that is usually about 3 to 4 hours. Here is the airport in Cusco. And here we will begin talking about the city tour and the 4 different ruins that we visit during the city tour. Again, pictured in the map for your convenience as a way to see how we map out the tour. So this can be done also in the morning or in the afternoon. It's possible to fly to Cusco from Lima in the morning and then do the tour in the afternoon. And it's about 3 to 4 hours. A part of it is walking, and another part is with bus transportation. So it begins in Coricancha with the Templo de Sol, the Sun Temple, which is really important to the Incas and the culture. And part of this is also the Santo Domingo Church, which is part of the Temple of the Sun also. This part is done walking. And we also walk to the Plaza de Armas and the cathedral. Afterwards, after we visit the Plaza de Armas, we go by bus and are transported to the 4 different ruins. So the first ruin we visit is the Sacsayhuamán, and then Kenko, Puca Pucará, and Tambo Machay, which are all pictured here. And one thing that is important to mention is when we're visiting Cusco and we do the city tour, we need to remember to include entrances. So that's something every time that we book our tours, we always try to make sure that this is mentioned, and that you should mention to your clients also that there are entrance fees to certain places in the city tour, which can be detailed later on when we are contacted. So Rainbow Mountain is also something really special to Cusco. It's a natural wonder that was actually only discovered back in 2015. And the reason for this is because it was covered with snow and glaciers. And once it finally melted, people started to notice the colors on the mountain, and therefore it became Rainbow Mountain. So, or in Spanish, Montaña de Siete Colores. So this has an elevation of 5,200 meters above sea level, and it's about 100 kilometers from Cusco. So we must leave super early in the morning, around 4:30, from Cusco to the Red Valley. Breakfast and lunch is included in this tour. It's important to remember that these are done at local communities near the mountain. And it's one of the most magnificent geological features in the world. And it's really worth it to visit. And in Cusco, so we don't only have the city tours and the regular visits with museum, things like this. We also like to offer experiences. So apart from this, we like to do cooking classes. This is done with combined with the city tour, and is possible to visit markets. It's possible to combine before or after the city tours. And also folkloric shows at dinner time are offered in many restaurants in Cusco, and it's done with Andean music, with typical dresses and costume. But keep in mind that this is normally done around 7 or 9 in the evening, and it's a buffet style dinner. And most important to the Inca culture is the Inti Raymi Festival of the Sun. This is very important for the Incan history. It's done on the 24th of June. The date never changes. And it's best to do this experience on a shared basis, just because the amount of people that are coming to the festival, the traffic, you're not allowed to use some roads sometimes. So when we do this in a group, it's much easier to do the visit compared to a private tour. So as you know, this is a religious celebration where the Incas are worshiping their god, the Inti, or as also it's known as the sun. And now we're on number 3, the Sacred Valley. Here we have a map of the Sacred Valley, and there's a number of different places within the Sacred Valley that we can include for this experience of Peru. Here is a map that outlines the typical full-day trip of the Sacred Valley. It usually is about 8 hours long. It begins in Cusco, and it's best to start it here. You continue on through Pisac and Urubamba. So starting here, Cusco, Pisac, Urubamba, and Ollantaytambo. We like to recommend to our guests that if the following day during their itinerary they'd like to do Machu Picchu, they can stay in Ollantaytambo, and that actually saves you time getting to Machu Picchu earlier in less of a hurry compared to leaving from Cusco. And if you decide to return to Cusco after doing the Sacred Valley tour, you can visit a place called Chincheros. So further explaining the Sacred Valley in general is also known as Urubamba Valley. And the reason it's called the Sacred Valley is because for the Incas, it's known as the land of fertility, and many popular destinations here are Pisac, Chinchero, Urubamba, Ollantaytambo, Yucay, and Cauca. Here we have a Huana Cancha. It's a visit that's done with the Sacred Valley tour, and we find different, believe it or not, 4 different types of Andean camels that can only be seen here. And part of the experience is seeing the local communities and how they live their lives daily. And part of this is actually a fun fact about Peru is that they have over 3,000 different types of potatoes. Coming from Maine, that's pretty interesting because our farmers are for potatoes, and I did not know that there were 3,000 different types. So this is about a 30-minute visit. It's really interesting to see the way that these people live and how they use agriculture in their life. So continuing on to important markets in the Sacred Valley. We have the Chinchero Market. That is what I had mentioned about returning to Cusco in the Sacred Valley tour. This is done on any day of the week, but these days, Tuesday, Thursday, and Sundays are when you see more people in the market, more indigenous and locals. So here you can see them making bargains with their neighbors and things like that, and they have a lot more products, and there's just a lot more commotion going on. It's really interesting to see. The other market that's interesting is Pisac, which is one of the main visits, and is also done on each day, but Tuesday, Thursdays, and Sundays are when it's most popular and there's a lot more people. And we have the Ollantaytambo Ruins and Village. This is a sacred village of the Incas, and it actually has the Temple of the Moon, which is really important because the sun and the moon are the two main gods of the Incas. So the entire site is archaeological, and principal sites are of agriculture from the Incan times. So another important fact to know about Ollantaytambo is that one of the trains that leave to Machu Picchu leaves from Ollantaytambo, and it's also where the Inca Trail begins. I believe the Salcantay Trail also, and you can arrive to Machu Picchu by those trails also. Additional experiences apart from the full day tour, for example, pictured here is the Patabamba community. This is a full day tour on its own within a local community, and pictured here are actually past guests of Gulliver expeditions. So you can see they're able to participate in the local dress, in the farming, cooking. So all the activities are done within the community. They participate in something called Pachamanga, where they actually cook underneath the earth as like an oven below the surface, and they eat with the locals. They don't speak any English at all whatsoever, so a guide will be necessary, and you return to Cusco in the afternoon. And it's a really nice experience that you can't get anywhere else. An additional experience is the Mara salt mines. This can be done with two different options. I mean, you will have transportation from Cusco until you arrive to the destination, but you can also, once you arrive, do this on bike. So it gives a nice alternative for those who might be more active. And it's still in use today, the salt mines, for lots of dairy products from Cusco. So you're not allowed to go into the salt mine, but you see it from the viewpoints that they've created. So majority of the salt is actually still exported to Cusco. Fun fact. And we have the terraces of Morai. So these are not in use today, but they have been preserved. And this shows you the ancient way that the Incas used to cultivate their agricultural produce. So each layer actually provides a different microclimate, which allowed them to make different types of crops. And obviously the ones farther inside included a hotter climate. So it's interesting to see how they use their own type of technology back in the Inca times, and how incredible it was, and how well preserved and well made it was. So we're on to number 4, which is the Machu Picchu. So this is the UNESCO World Heritage Site, one of the 7 wonders of the world, and it can be reached by train and 3 different trekking programs. The first is the Inca Trail, one of the most popular, Salcantay, and Inca Jungle. So in order to arrive to Machu Picchu, it's important to understand the different ways to get there. And the principal way to arrive is that you must come to Aguascalientes first, and you do that by taking a train. So trains leave from either Cusco and Ollantaytambo, but the important thing to mention is the train doesn't actually leave from Cusco. You take a transfer to a small town called Poroy, and then the train leaves from there. So that's something to keep in mind, that there's always a transfer involved when leaving or arriving back to Cusco. From Ollantaytambo, you take the train from there. And here is Aguascalientes. And you can see here, with this is the train station. And this green bus right here is actually the type of bus that brings you the rest of the way to Machu Picchu. So the train doesn't actually arrive per se to the citadel of Machu Picchu. We arrive here first and then take the bus. Here is the bus to the entrance, as I showed before, and arriving to the entrance of Machu Picchu. So when we're visiting Machu Picchu, it's important to remember that you must enter with a guide, and you have a total time limit to visit Machu Picchu of 4 hours. So the first 2 hours, you're going to be accompanied by a guide. The guide is going to show you all the important things about Machu Picchu, all the information and the knowledge that they have to share. And then for the next 2 hours, you're allowed to explore within the limits that are allowed for the tourists. And then you can take your photos and everything. But the minute that you are out, you cannot re-enter. And you must return to Aguascalientes, and you won't always be accompanied by a guide, especially if you have the guide at the first 2 hours. One important visit that is also within Machu Picchu is a place, this mountain right here, called Huayna Picchu. Not many people know about it, but it's an interesting thing to mention for those that are more adventurous and looking for a more extreme activity, is that you can hike this. However, this does have other costs, and a guide is recommended due to the trail. So once we're out of Machu Picchu after the 4-hour visit, we jump back on the bus to Aguascalientes, and we can either return to Cusco or we can return to Ollantaytambo. And for people who are looking to do something a little bit more private and to their wants and needs, you can also do the Sacred Valley the next day in a private tour. Because when you start from the Sacred Valley, it's important to remember that the Sacred Valley tour ends in Ollantaytambo. So it's hard to do a shared tour in the Sacred Valley starting from Ollantaytambo. And then we normally return to Poroy and then a transfer back to Cusco. So it's important to mention also here that during certain times of the year, we have rainy months. So from March to May, the train to Machu Picchu will only leave from Ollantaytambo due to the heavy rains that don't allow the train to leave from Poroy. And to continue, visiting Machu Picchu can also be done with various treks. And here is the Salcantay trek. It's one of my favorites, actually, because it's 5 days long, and we spend 4 different nights throughout different areas. And it's really interesting to do because the people that accompany you, the guides, are really knowledgeable. They're in their native clothing sometimes, in their native dress, and they just know all these different legends and myths of the treks and the same things that the Incas used to travel along themselves. So this is just a layout of the different sites and overnights that you spend. And here's a visual for you, one of our actual past volunteers at Gulliver Expeditions. And continuing on, we have the Inca Trail. So the Inca Trail is 4 days, 3 nights. And here are the different sites that you visit along the way. And a picture here. The Inca Trail is also available to do for 3 days and 2 nights. And I believe there's also a 2-day trail also. So Continuing on, most people after they do the Sacred Valley, we continue to Lake Titicaca. So this is south of the Sacred Valley, which is this area here, and we can do this two different ways. Options are to go by bus, and as I had mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Peru's bus transportations are one of the best, and they will follow the sun route when traveling to Puno, where Lake Titicaca is located. So when we're traveling from Cusco to Puno, there's actually many different sites and ruins that are really interesting. And the great thing about the bus is that you actually get to have a more interactive travel, because you can stop at these different places until finally arriving to Puno. The other alternative is to take a luxury train. So this is a luxury option, which allows you to be having the experience of the train. There's no visits, there's no stops. They'll pass by the same places as the sun route, but just with an explanation on the train. And the third way to actually get to Puno is taking a plane from Cusco to Puno. From Cusco to Juliaca. So Juliaca is actually an airport about an hour and 15 minutes away from Puno. Sorry for that mix up. So it's important to remember that you're not going to arrive straight into Puno. And when we arrive to Puno, we'll stay overnight. And the best is to visit Lake Titicaca the next day. So Lake Titicaca is actually the highest navigable lake in the world and the largest in South America. And it is not only part of Peru, but it also borders Bolivia. And the main attraction here are the islands of Taquil and Uros, because they're actually floating islands that were created by the Incans themselves, and people are still living on these islands to this day. So the most common trip is to do this in one day. You leave from Puno on a navigable boat, on a speedboat, and the trip usually lasts about 6 to 7 hours. So you have some navigation till you arrive to the island, and then you do some walking on the island with the guide, learning about the different ways that they've built the island and their houses and their way of life, and why they continue to live this way. So pictured here is Puno. Puno is a really small town, and there's not much to do here, but the main attraction is to visit the islands. So pictured here are these speedboats. There's some smaller ones and there's some larger ones, and this is what we use to arrive to the islands. So here is a look at Uros Island, and all the islands look like this with this type of style. So the islands were actually created by tall reeds and water grass being weaved together. And when you're visiting the island, you get to share with the community, see how they live, how they built their houses, their canoes, and the reasons why they do it like this. And of course, our main idea is always to create experiences. And what we have here is that we have created an experience where you can actually spend the night on Titicaca Lake. So you're not going to spend the night in the same grass and tall reed houses as the natives. They actually have a special lodging here, as you can see in the pictures. But it's a really great way to get a more in-depth look at their life living on the islands that you wouldn't otherwise get to know. And we continue. So we're going to be leaving Puno, like you see on the map. You'll see in every slide up to now, we always want you to see how we arrive to the next destination, because Peru is quite large. So it's easy to get confused, but we want to take the confusion out of it for you. So here we have Puno, arriving to Chivay, and then visiting the Cusco Canyon, which is our number 6 top 8 of Peru. Here we're going to take a bus, and when we arrived at Chivay, the main attraction here is the Cusco Canyon. So we want to live live this experience early in the morning when the condors, as one of the main attractions, are most active. So when we arrive to Chivay, the following day in the morning is when we go to visit Cusco Canyon. This is one of the deepest canyons in the world. There's actually some Inca terraces, as shown in Morai previously in the Sacred Valley, that are still cultivated to this day. So they're still in use, which is pretty incredible. And pictured here is the Cruz del Condor, which is also really special to the area. And there's also some trekking available inside the canyon. So here we leave in the morning, as I mentioned, and we arrive to Cruz del Condor about 9 a.m. You want to stay here about an hour and more, depending on the climate, of course, so that you can have the best possible chance to see the condors. So once they start flying around, you'll just be able to see just how big they are and magnificent they are. And it's one of the main attractions here at the canyon. And as you can see, here is the Andean condor. And when we're done with the visit, we return back to Chivay. And we have lunch just a little bit before arriving, but we're not going to stay in Chivay after we visit the Cusco Canyon and the Cruz del Condor. And we usually suggest returning to Arequipa. So here we have in the map, again, we're going to do this by bus transportation. Here is the Cruz del Condor. We'll have lunch about here, just before Chivay, and we continue down to Arequipa. And of course, there are some trekking options within the canyon, as you can see. And these are under special request. Now, once we're in Arequipa, you should know that this is actually the second most populated and important city of the country. It's located about 2,335 meters above sea level. There are some important volcanoes located nearby, as you can see in the background. And it's an important city for Peru, industrial-wise. So we're going to do a city tour here, and this is a half-day walking. We can add other activities to it to make it a full day also. That's always a possibility to add extra experiences. And part of the city tour is visiting the monastery of Santa Catalina. And one of the most popular destinations in the city tour is the Mummy Juanita. She was actually a small girl who was found in the Peruvian volcanoes, hidden under glaciers. And she was actually sacrificed in the time of the Incas. And when they buried her, she had stayed frozen, so she was preserved perfectly. And she's a really important part of the Incan history and the culture of Peru. So this is one of the big highlights of this city tour. And of course, when we're looking for extra experiences, Gulliver has personally found this experience for our guests, which is called the Chacchao Factory. So it's actually the first place to have a bean to bar organic artisanal chocolate. The cacao is praised, as they would say, like the Aztecs, with much respect and care. And they do the chocolate in almost every possible version that you can imagine. And the great thing is that you can do workshops with the cacao, or you can relax, enjoy some beer, enjoy some artisanal beer, or pizza. The pizza is really nice because it's gluten-free. They have it with all kinds of different flavors, and it's a nice way to spend a relaxing afternoon. So here we have top 8 of Peru. Number 7, we're almost at the last one. And this is Paracas and the Ballesta Islands. Usually after leaving Arequipa, it would be best to fly back to Lima from the airport located in Arequipa, and then from Lima, take a bus down to Paracas and Ica, because otherwise Arequipa to Paracas is a very, very long ride of over 17 hours. So the Paraca and Ballestas Island, these are one of the oldest protected areas in Peru. There's over 400 different species of flora and fauna, and there are some important geoglyphs from Incan times and before, and of course the Ballesta Islands. This is one of the geoglyphs that you can see when you're visiting this area is the candelabra. And of course, these are one of the many wonders of man because we still don't know how it was created or who it was created by. So it adds a really nice experience when you're passing by on the water. In the Ballesta Islands, there's penguins and sea lions. I believe there's also some blue-footed boobies and different shorebirds. So it's a really nice visit for those who are interested in an experience with some wildlife and on the coast. The Paracas Reserve, generally this is visited in different ways like four-wheelers or buggies, and you can see different archaeological remnants near the cliffs and really amazing views of the desert with the ocean in the background. It's really quite spectacular. And continuing on to our last top 8 of Peru is the Nazca Lines. So from Paracas, we can do this a few ways. We can take a bus to Ica, or we can drive all the way down to Nazca. Our recommendation is to stop in Ica and take the flight from Ica flying over the Nazca Lines because we have many different experiences that we can offer this way. So when we're doing the Nazca flight from either Ica or Nazca, we're using really light planes as pictured. And when you're in Ica, the flight usually takes about an hour and 10 minutes due to the distance that it is from Nazca. And you fly over the Nazca Lines and then return to Ica. And if you arrive to Nazca to do the flight usually lasts about 30 minutes. Now, when we're flying over the Nazca Lines, there's about 70 different geoglyphs, 70 to 900 different geoglyphs. It's about 80 kilometers from Ica, and it's another UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the amazing things about these Nazca Lines is the natural wonders of them. And during the tour, you can see the most popular ones like the spider and the hummingbird. And here are some other examples of the Nazca Lines that flying over. So when we say to do the experience of the Nazca Lines beginning from Ica, it's not going to take up much of your day because when you do the flight from Ica, it's only about an hour and 10, 15 minutes. So you have the rest of the day to enjoy. And just about 10 to 15 minutes from Ica, you can find Huacachina. So Huacachina is actually what many picture as a desert oasis. And as pictured here, there's a small lagoon and many different activities to enjoy like buggy tours and sandboarding. And in Ica, we also have different experiences like a wine and pisco tasting tour. And when you visit Peru, you definitely want to make sure that you taste the pisco because it's known for coming from Peru. And here you can do different activities with the foods and the wines. So when we're usually programming a trip to Peru, pictured here is a typical itinerary that you will see. Normally our guests will arrive into Lima and we'll have them stay overnight. And here, for example, we have them on a bus going to Ica and then doing the flight over the Nazca Lines and returning to Paracas. And then we'll do the Ballesta Islands and the Paracas Reserve and then travel back to Lima and spend it overnight for a flight the next day to Cusco. And then typically when we visit Cusco, we'll do the city tour in the 4 ruins. So this would be the city tour in the afternoon. And then the following day, a Sacred Valley tour, and, adding in those different experiences with the communities and the salt mines. And then the following day, you can see here that we have it planned out for them to stay overnight in Ollantaytambo, because you can save time arriving to Machu Picchu much earlier and doing the trip to Machu Picchu and returning to Cusco. After that, we'll do the sun's route on bus to Puno, where they can do the different visits, the additional sites in the Sacred Valley, and we'll do the Lake Titicaca with Urus and Taquile. Here we do the following day from Puno, we go to Chivay to do the Cusco Canyon the following day with the cruise at Condor. And like we pictured in the last slides, the following day, bus and city tour to Arequipa, and then transfer out Arequipa to your connecting international flight or to your next visit. Now, of course, this is like a general roundabout itinerary, trying to visit the best top 8 visits and destinations in Peru as pictured in the webinar. But we're always happy to custom make your itineraries for different experiences, different interests. Just let us know what you're looking for, and our travel agents will be able to customize and tailor make any type of itinerary that you're looking for to our best abilities. So in conclusion of Peru, Peru is a perfect combination between nature, culture, and adventure. The country is very easy to reach and has an excellent transportation system, and is very easy to go in between these different visits. There's great landscapes and really stunning archaeological places to visit, full of knowledge and history and culture to be discovered by our guests. So I hope you liked our webinar today. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to contact us anytime, and we'll always be ready and happy to help. Thank you.